This audiobook, inspired by the teachings of Dr. Lisa Miller, weaves together science and spirit, data and depth to illuminate how spirituality impacts mental health, resilience, connection, and purpose. Through her guidance, Dr. Miller invites us to see that we are not alone, not random, not broken. We are wired to connect with the sacred, and through that connection, to heal, to grow, and to flourish. Across 8 chapters, you'll be guided through powerful ideas and practices that connect neuroscience with spirituality and personal struggle with profound awakening. Whether you listen in sequence or return to favorite sections over time, this audiobook offers a space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with the deeper intelligence within you. Let it accompany you like a trusted teacher. Present, grounded, and always pointing you back to the wisdom already alive in your own awakened mind. Chapter 1: The Science of Spirituality. We are born with a spiritual faculty, a neuro-docking station, through which we are naturally equipped to perceive, engage, and live in relationship with a transcendent reality. As a clinical psychologist and scientist, with more than 2 decades at Columbia University, my life's work has centered on investigating the real, measurable impact of spirituality on human thriving. Through neuroscience, psychology, and genetics, what we've discovered is profound and undeniable. We are hardwired for spirituality. This is not metaphorical. Peer-reviewed science, replicated across disciplines, tells us that the human brain is biologically equipped to engage in a spiritual life. Our studies, spanning brain scans, epidemiology, and twin studies, reveal an innate human capacity to experience a deep, transcendent relationship. A relationship in which we feel guided, held, and never alone. Strengthening this capacity changes how our lives unfold. It impacts our relationships, our resilience, our mental health, and our ability to make meaning out of suffering. I wrote The Awakened Brain because this knowledge, the profound evidence of our spiritual core, was not reaching the public square. It was stuck in academic journals and confined to clinical settings. But spirituality is not the property of scientists or institutions. It belongs to everyone. And so I made it my mission to take this science, this sacred truth backed by data, and offer it as a guide for anyone seeking purpose, connection, and healing. Let me be clear. Spirituality is not religion. Religion is a structured, culturally transmitted system through sacred texts, rituals, and communities. Spirituality, on the other hand, is innate. Twin studies show us that about 1/3 of our spiritual orientation is hardwired, and the remaining 2/3 is formed by our environment and our choices. How we meditate, pray, engage with others, and connect to the natural world. When I first began this work, I saw the revolving door of mental health treatment. I was an intern in a New York City hospital, watching patients return over and over, despite receiving therapy and medication. The system was full of brighter, caring professionals. But something was missing. Again and again, patients would pull me aside, into kitchens, back rooms, and whisper truths that didn't fit into the conventional model of care. Will you pray with me? I need to tell you something spiritual. These were not small disclosures. These were sacred jewels, hidden because they didn't belong in our mental health framework. What I witnessed was a great disconnect. The most powerful healing force, the spiritual core of a human being, was being treated as taboo. So I turned to science, not to reduce spirituality, but to legitimize it in the language the clinical world respects. I use MRI machines, EEGs, and longitudinal studies. And the results confirmed what I had intuited from those secret conversations in the hospital hallways. The spiritual core is real, measurable, and transformative. MRI studies show that spiritual experiences are not just abstract feelings. They activate specific regions in the brain. The same regions associated with compassion, self-awareness, and moral reasoning. People with a strong spiritual life have increased cortical thickness in areas that support perception and reflection. These are not fringe findings. They are as empirically grounded as any psychological metric. Moreover, spirituality isn't just an abstract nice to have. It is a protective factor, especially against depression. Our research shows that those who cultivate a strong spiritual life are 75% less likely to experience recurring major depression. And if someone is biologically or environmentally at high risk, living with chronic stress, or raised in a traumatic household, the protective benefit of spirituality climbs to 90%. What makes this even more powerful is the fact that spiritual development is not fixed. Unlike IQ or temperament, which are largely stable traits, spirituality is malleable. It grows with us. It deepens when we make meaningful choices. When we meditate, pray, serve others, or simply walk in nature with an open heart. Our spiritual life is not separate from our mental and emotional well-being. It is the ground in which they take root. Now, why is this important? Because our current culture, our secular, post-industrial, hyper-rational society, has systematically stripped spirituality from the public square. In an effort to be inclusive, we removed religious language from classrooms, boardrooms, and media. But in doing so, we also silenced the spiritual heart. We left people without a map to navigate life's most profound questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What happens when I suffer? What is my relationship to others and to the universe? We are not meant to answer these questions with logic alone. We are not sealed off, isolated minds bouncing around a meaningless cosmos. That narrative, cold, atomized, and purely rational, is not only insufficient, it is devastating. It leaves us vulnerable to depression, addiction, and despair. And yet, within each of us, the capacity for awakening remains. Even in darkness, the spiritual faculty is alive, waiting to be engaged. When we strengthen it, we don't just feel better, we become better, more creative, more empathetic, more whole. The question is not whether we are spiritual beings. The question is, are we listening? Are we cultivating? We are souls on earth. Each one of us is born with the tools to perceive sacred reality, to live in love and meaning, to experience synchronicity and deep guidance. This isn't wishful thinking. It's science. And it's also the most beautiful truth we can reclaim. Chapter 2. Awakened, Awareness and the Brain. Awakened awareness is not just a poetic phrase. It is a measurable, observable state of consciousness. It is the mode of perception that allows us to sense a deeper truth behind everyday experience, a connection to the sacred, to others, and to the greater unfolding of life. And it is a form of awareness that can be cultivated and strengthened, both experientially and neurologically. When we live in awakened awareness, we experience life as a dynamic, meaningful dialogue. We notice patterns, guidance, synchronicities. We feel held and loved, even in difficulty. We sense that we are not alone, that there is something more, something greater, moving with us. This awareness is available to all of us. And from a neuroscientific perspective, It has a distinct signature. Brain imaging studies using functional MRI and EEG have revealed that the awakened brain is fundamentally different from an unawakened or purely achieving-focused brain. In awakened awareness, the brain exhibits sustained activity in the parietal, precuneus, and occipital regions, areas associated with perception, self-reflection, and interconnectedness. The cortex is measurably thicker, particularly in individuals who maintain a strong spiritual life over time. Cortical thickness isn't about raw intelligence. It's about capacity. The capacity to reflect, to notice, to step back and perceive meaning in complexity. It suggests a brain that is more resilient, more connected, more perceptive. And crucially, this brain structure builds over time when one engages in sustained spiritual practices. Prayer, meditation, time in nature, sacred reading, acts of compassion. Contrast this with what we call achieving awareness, the dominant mode of perception in modern society. Achieving awareness is problem-solving mode. It's logical, tactical, and focused on goals. It is how we get things done, how we move forward in the world. It's responsible for incredible feats, medical advances, space travel, complex technologies. But as a standalone mode, it is insufficient when life throws us into the unknown. Grief, illness, failure, or existential crisis. Achieving awareness alone cannot hold us. And this is where awakened awareness becomes essential. When achieving awareness says, there's no solution, awakened awareness says, there's deeper meaning here. When logic fails to explain, awakened awareness reveals connection, synchronicity, and spiritual presence. It allows us to ask, what is life showing me now? What am I being asked to become? The tragedy is that our society has profoundly overdeveloped achieving awareness while leaving awakened awareness nearly dormant. If we were to assign numbers, achieving awareness in our culture would score a 9.9 out of 10. Awakened awareness, a 2 or a 3. This imbalance doesn't make us more functional. It makes us lost. It leads to burnout, disconnection, depression, and the widespread feeling that something is missing, even when all our goals are met. But here's the miracle. The awakened brain is not fixed at birth. It can be developed. The tracks of spiritual perception, what we might call neural highways, can be myelinated, reinforced, and deepened through use. When we choose to engage our spiritual life, when we meditate, pray, walk in nature, or help others from the heart, we strengthen the neural circuitry of awakened awareness. In one of our long-term studies, we found that individuals who lived with sustained spiritual practices over 8 years developed brains that were measurably more protective against depression. These individuals weren't merely spiritual by nature. They had built their spiritual lives through daily choices. And the result was not just a sense of peace. It was neurological protection. People with awakened awareness were significantly less likely to suffer from recurring depression, even under stress or genetic vulnerability. This is radical. Spirituality doesn't just help us feel good. It builds a stronger brain. It provides the neurological foundation for resilience, clarity, and connectedness. In contrast, the regions of the brain that are thin in recurrent major depression are the very regions thick in the awakened brain. That means our choice to cultivate a spiritual life is not just a philosophical decision, it's a biological one. And how do we cultivate it? The first step is noticing. When we step out of the narrow tunnel of achieving awareness and begin to ask, what is life showing me now? We begin to awaken. when we pause to reflect on synchronicities, those unlikely coincidences that feel filled with meaning. We strengthen our dialogue with life. When we open to the idea that we are in relationship with something greater and that life is not random but responsive, we begin to perceive the sacred. We begin to experience what I call the unitive field, the sense that we are not separate beings bumping around in a material world, but waves on one ocean, expressions of one consciousness. And this is not just spiritual metaphor. It is consistent with the brainwave patterns of deep meditation, with the EEG signatures of spiritual engagement, and with the felt experience of millions. In awakened awareness, the brain begins to synchronize with the rhythm of life itself. The high-amplitude alpha waves of the spiritually engaged brain match the Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic frequency of the earth. That means the more awakened we are, the more our brain vibrates in harmony with all life. We literally attune to the planet, to nature, to the pulse of the cosmos. This explains why we feel different in nature, why the forest or the ocean can move us to tears. It's not just beauty, it's resonance. Our brain is syncing with the field of life, and in that harmony, we perceive the oneness behind all things. From this place, we make different choices. We lead with compassion. We create with purpose. We respond to hardship not just with strategy, but with grace. We listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. We become capable of hearing the subtle guidance of life itself. The awakened brain is not a luxury. It is a necessity, especially in a time when depression and anxiety are soaring, when the old models of success are crumbling, and when young people are searching for meaning in a world that often feels empty. The answer is not to abandon logic or achievement, but to balance them with awakened awareness, to integrate the tactical and the transcendent, to use our full human capacity, mind, brain, soul, to live in alignment with something greater. This is not a dream. It is a calling, and it is already happening. The neuroscience confirms it. The inner experiences affirm it. And the awakened brain, the organ of sacred perception, is waiting for us to use it. Chapter 3. Nature, Synchronicity, and Oneness. There are moments when we find ourselves in nature, in the quiet of a forest, by the edge of the ocean, beneath a starlit sky. And something shifts. The boundaries dissolve. The static noise of everyday life fades. And in its place emerges a profound stillness, a felt sense of belonging. This is not sentimentality. This is a neurological, spiritual, and biological reunion with the field of life. It is awakened awareness in action. In those moments, the brain synchronizes with the Earth's natural rhythm, the Schumann resonance. It's the same wavelength emitted by the Earth's electromagnetic field. Measured through EEG, this frequency also characterizes the high-amplitude alpha waves of the spiritually engaged brain. That's not coincidence. That's resonance. When we are spiritually awakened, our brains vibrate in harmony with the rhythm of all life. We align not just philosophically, but physiologically with the natural world. This is why animals sense us before we arrive. It's why forests feel different than city streets. In nature, the noise of achieving awareness quiets, and we re-enter the field of connected life. We begin to feel what indigenous cultures have long known, that all life is relational, responsive, and conscious. I remember kayaking down a river one spring. The water was high and the current was fierce, stirred by the melted snow. As I paddled hard, a flock of geese emerged from the swell, gesturing unmistakably for me to go right. I followed. Moments later, I narrowly missed a massive cement pylon hidden beneath the water's surface. The geese had guided me to safety. Later, another group signaled left. Again, I followed. And again, I avoided danger. They had warned me twice, but further down, no geese appeared. I hit a submerged pylon and flipped. As I struggled to regain control, 2 humans stood on the nearby hill. I waved, called out, pleaded. They turned their backs, got in their car, and drove away. The animals had been present, responsive, and relational. The humans, detached, distracted, unaware of the living symphony around them. This is the paradox of our species. We are capable of profound spiritual awareness, and yet we are also prone to disconnection. But the disconnect is not inevitable. It is a choice. We can remember. We can rejoin the kingdom of life. This experience illuminated something that haunts and drives me. The silent holocaust against fellow living beings. If a visitor from another world observed our treatment of animals, they might conclude that the blind were torturing those who could see. Animals are not primitive. They are tuned. They live in harmony with the sacred rhythm. And we, though we often ignore it, can too. We are not alone. We are not above. We are not separate. We are in a living conversation with all life. And when we open our minds and hearts, the guidance flows. That guidance often arrives through synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that defy probability. A person we haven't spoken to in years reaches out just as we think of them. A book falls off a shelf with the exact insight we need. A chance encounter shifts the trajectory of our life. These are not accidents. They are the language of awakened awareness. They are the universe whispering. Yes, this way. You are not alone. Synchronicities are a sacred form of guidance. They are often trail markers on the spiritual path. I invite people to reflect on them deeply. I even guide an exercise called the 3 doors, which helps uncover how red doors that were stuck, opportunities we pushed for that, wouldn't open, eventually redirected us toward yellow doors, which were better aligned with who we truly are. And often, in between, was a trail angel. Someone who offered unexpected insight or encouragement that shifted everything. Think back on your own life. When a red door slammed shut, what yellow door opened? Who was the trail angel that showed you the way? These moments are not just coincidences. They are sacred choreography. They are evidence that life is not random. Life is relational. It speaks, guides, and responds. When we listen, one of the most striking synchronicities I've encountered came through a dream. A young man, uncertain about his future, dreamt of a child on a bicycle who simply said, Jungian psychology. The next day, his sister casually mentioned a Jungian workshop happening nearby. He attended, and that decision set in motion the creation of an entire spiritual education platform. One that reached thousands. This is how the awakened path unfolds, mysteriously, beautifully, and precisely. But to hear the guidance, we must quiet the noise. Our culture trains us in achieving awareness. Set a goal, make a plan, take the steps. But spiritual truth rarely arrives through effort alone. It comes through openness, receptivity, and presence, the sacred whispers. And when we attune, we recognize its voice. This is the gift of awakened awareness. It allows us to perceive that we are part of something much greater, that the forest is alive, that the ocean is speaking, that the birds and the wind and the geese are in dialogue with us. not metaphorically, truly. And it's not only nature that teaches us. Other people, strangers, friends, mentors, also become vessels of synchronicity. A story shared at the right time, a sentence overheard that hits our heart, a question asked in passing that unlocks something deep. These are sacred echoes. And when we live with awakened awareness, we become trail angels for others as well. The experience of oneness is not just a feeling. It is a perception grounded in spiritual neuroscience. When we enter high-amplitude, alpha states, through prayer, meditation, or deep communion with nature, we perceive reality differently. The world becomes more unified, more alive, more meaningful. We are not separate points. We are waves on one ocean. Eden, then, is not a mythic place of the past. Eden is a state of being available to us right now when we choose to live in harmony with the living world. When we attune our minds and hearts to the sacred rhythm around us, we re-enter Eden. We remember who we are, not disconnected individuals, but participants in a vast, loving web of life. Nature is not just a resource. It is our teacher. Synchronicity is not just luck. It is communication. And oneness is not just an ideal. It is our true state, revealed when we awaken the full capacity of our mind, heart, and soul. Chapter 4. Spiritual depression and the call to awakening. Depression is often misunderstood. We view it as a malfunction, a disorder, a deviation from health. But in truth, many depressions are not signs of dysfunction. They are signals of growth. They are the spiritual knock at the door, an invitation to awaken. In our data, we see this clearly. Over 2/3 of depressive episodes are what we call developmental depressions. These are not pathological states. They are transitions. They are the soul's call to evolve. Developmental depression arises when the life we were living, the beliefs we held, or the way we saw ourselves no longer fits. It may happen after loss, failure, or disillusionment, but it may also come without warning. One day, life that felt fine now feels hollow. Nothing outside has changed, yet everything inside feels insufficient. That is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough in disguise. Depression asks us to pause, to shed an outdated version of ourselves, to release the old identity, the old map, and make space for something truer, deeper, and more aligned. And this process is painful, not because we are failing, but because we are transforming. The cocoon must dissolve for the butterfly to emerge. Often, what initiates this transformation is spiritual disconnection, not just from others or from joy, but from the deeper reality that we are loved, guided, and held. In a secular culture, where the public square has gone silent on spiritual life, we are left without language or support for these awakenings. And so we mislabel them. We treat the symptoms, but ignore the call. But when we listen to the depression, when we engage with it spiritually, something remarkable happens. We begin to ask new questions. Why is this happening? What is life asking of me? What have I outgrown? What is emerging in its place? These are not clinical questions. They are sacred ones. I often say that depression and spiritual awakening are two sides of the same door. On one side, despair, confusion, loss. On the other, clarity, connection, purpose. The key is to walk through, to not avoid or suppress the pain, but to move through it with spiritual support, reflection, and openness. And when we do, the rewards are extraordinary. Emerging from a developmental depression often brings heightened spiritual awareness. The same regions of the brain that were darkened by despair become lit with insight and connection. We become more attuned, more compassionate, more creative. We see life not just as something to survive, but as something sacred to engage. But for this transformation to happen, we must have space. We must have language. We must have communities and practices that recognize the spiritual nature of our suffering. Without that, depression can become chronic. But with that, it becomes catalytic. This is why spirituality is not optional. It is essential. It is the terrain of the soul. And the soul cannot be ignored without cost. Too often, our response to depression is to numb, avoid, or distract. We medicate, we consume, we work harder. But what if the depression is not asking us to do more, but to feel more, to connect more deeply, to listen? I believe depression is often the soul's alarm system. It sounds when we've drifted too far from our essence. It sounds when our environment, our relationships, or our inner world no longer serve our growth. And it keeps sounding, gently or fiercely, until we turn inward and listen. In this, listening, spiritual guidance often arrives, not in booming voices, but in subtle signs. A stranger's words, a dream, a passage in a book, a conversation that cracks something open. These are synchronicities, sacred alignments that help us navigate through the darkness. One of the most powerful truths I've discovered is that suffering expands the vessel of the soul. When we endure pain with openness, we become capable of holding more love, more joy, more light. The glass doesn't remain half empty. It grows larger, and new life fills it. This expansion is what transforms us. It doesn't erase the past. It integrates it. And we come to see that even our darkest seasons were not wasted. They were initiations. They were sacred tunnels that led to the open field. In the awakened life, nothing is meaningless. Every moment is part of the unfolding. And depression, when embraced as a spiritual teacher, becomes a portal to the next chapter of our being. I've witnessed this countless times. People who felt hopeless and broken emerge as leaders, healers, artists, visionaries. Not in spite of their suffering, but because of how they met it. Because they answered the call and walked through the fire with grace. The same is true for our collective experience. The pandemic was, in many ways, a global developmental depression. It broke our routines, our assumptions, and our illusions of control. And it opened a space, a sacred pause, in which millions began to re-evaluate what matters, what is real, and how we want to live. Now, as we move forward, the question becomes, will we forget? Or will we integrate? Will we return to achieving awareness? Or will we live from awakened awareness? Will we numb ourselves with noise and consumption? Or will we deepen into the truth that was revealed? We are being invited, individually and collectively, to awaken. Depression is not the end of the road. It is the dark soil from which new life blooms. And when we trust this process, when we seek and listen and stay open, we are led. Not back to who we were, but forward into who we are becoming. This is the promise of awakened awareness. It doesn't remove the pain, it transforms it. It doesn't prevent the struggle, it gives it meaning. And it reminds us that, even in our darkest moments, we are not alone. We are guided, we are held, and we are growing toward the light. Chapter 5. Transcendence and the NonLocal mind. We are conditioned to believe that our minds are confined within our brains, that consciousness is simply a byproduct of biology. But the evidence emerging from spiritual neuroscience paints a different picture. Consciousness is not local. It is not trapped behind our eyes. It is expansive, relational, and transcendent. This has profound implications. It means that our awareness, our very being, can reach beyond the physical boundaries of space and time. We are more than the sum of our neurons. We are expressions of something infinite. One of the most remarkable demonstrations of this truth came from a study I often reference. An experiment conducted by the late Gene Achterberg. 2 individuals were placed in separate buildings, each inside an fMRI scanner. One was a traditional healer, the other a patient. The healer began their sacred practice, praying, meditating, invoking the sacred with the intention to heal. And then within moments, something astounding happened. The patient's brain, located in another building with no physical contact, began to mirror the neural patterns of the healer. The same fMRI activation, the same waveforms, the same response. This is not metaphor. This is measurement. This is non-locality of consciousness. The implication is staggering. The healer's consciousness influenced the patient's biology at a distance, not through speech, not through physical interaction, but through sacred intention, through spiritual engagement. This is not the stuff of fantasy. It is repeatable, observable, and deeply aligned with what mystics and spiritual teachers have long known. We are not sealed minds in isolated bodies. We are fields of consciousness, in dynamic interaction with one another and with the universe itself. This aligns with the work of pioneers like Larry Dossey, who coined the phrase "one mind" to describe this interconnected consciousness. And what these studies suggest is that healing, real, measurable, biological healing, can occur through love, intention, and sacred connection, not in violation of science, but through a deeper understanding of what science has not yet fully embraced. The brain, then, is not a factory that manufactures thoughts. It is more like a receiver and transmitter, an antenna tuned to consciousness. It receives input from the transcendent field and expresses it through language, emotion, and behavior. And it can send intention and presence outward, affecting others in ways we are only beginning to understand. This view reframes everything. If consciousness is non-local, then we are never truly alone. If consciousness is transcendent, then love and intention are not bound by time or distance. They can reach, touch, and transform across any barrier. It also changes how we see death, grief, and separation. If our loved ones are part of this vast field, then their presence does not end with physical absence. We remain connected, always, in the sacred web of being. The veil is thin, and through awakened awareness, we perceive this truth. There are countless stories of people receiving guidance from deceased loved ones, of dreams delivering precise messages, of intuition knowing things the rational mind could not. These are not anomalies. They are natural expressions of a non-local mind. And it is through awakened awareness that we access this realm, the practices that open this door. Meditation, prayer, deep presence are not about escape. They are about expansion. They tune our inner antenna to the sacred frequency, where guidance flows and connection transcends the physical. This is why synchronicity is so important. Synchronicity is not just a pleasant coincidence. It is evidence of the field at work. It is the visible expression of an invisible connection. When inner events and outer events align with deep meaning, we are seeing the sacred in action. We are witnessing the dance between spirit and matter. Our modern worldview has separated these things. It has told us that science and spirit cannot coexist. But that is a false dichotomy. The deepest science, quantum mechanics, neuroscience, consciousness studies, is beginning to touch the edge of mystery. And it is at this edge that integration becomes possible. We must be willing to let go of old models. The mechanistic, reductionist view of the mind as a machine is collapsing. In its place, we are discovering something far more beautiful. A participatory universe, where love and intention shape reality, where each of us is a node in a sacred web, and where the soul is real, powerful, and central to human life. In this vision, the brain is sacred. It is not merely a physical organ. It is a doorway, a threshold, a means through which consciousness enters and expresses itself. And through spiritual practice, we keep that doorway open, clear, and aligned. Awakened awareness, then, is not only a state of mind, it is a tuning of the entire self, body, mind, heart, and soul, to the deeper reality in which we are embedded. It is the act of remembering that we are not alone, not separate, not random. We are held. We are guided. We are connected to something infinite. The more we cultivate this awareness, the more life begins to respond. The right people show up. The guidance becomes clear. The path opens before us. Not because we control it, but because we are in relationship with it. This is the sacred dialogue. We listen, we act, we trust. And in doing so, we become vessels for something far greater than ourselves. There is a force, call it God, Spirit, Source, that moves through all life. When we align with it, miracles unfold. Not dramatic spectacles, but quiet, profound openings. Healing insight, grace. These are the fruits of the awakened brain, and the invitation is always present. To move beyond the illusion of separation. To remember that the sacred is not elsewhere. It is here, in us, through us, all around us. We are not spectators. We are participants. We are agents of the divine in action. In the awakened life, every thought, every word, every intention becomes part of the sacred field. And through our awareness, we shape the world. Not through force, but through resonance. Not through domination, but through love. Chapter 6. Reclaiming Spirituality in a Secular Age. Over the past 4 decades, in an effort to be inclusive and progressive, we have removed religion from our shared public spaces. Classrooms, boardrooms, campuses, media. It was a well-meaning move, intended to make room for diversity, to ensure no belief system dominated. But in doing so, we did not just remove religious doctrine. We silenced the entire language of the soul. We confused spirituality with dogma. And as a result, we created a vacuum. In that vacuum, a quiet crisis has emerged. Our society became spiritually non-conversant. We stopped talking about the things that matter most. What gives life meaning? Why are we here? How do we heal? What is our purpose? These questions, once held in sacred community, now echo silently in the minds of individuals left to answer them alone. In the place of spiritual wisdom, we substituted consumerism. Shopping became the new gospel. Acquisition replaced contemplation. Our value system shifted from "who are you becoming" to "what are you buying?" From "what is your soul's purpose?" to "what is your career trajectory?" The sacred became sentimentalized or dismissed, and with it, we lost not only our language, but our inner compass. We now face the consequences of this great forgetting. Rates of addiction, depression, and suicide are rising, especially among young people. Gen Z in particular is experiencing an unprecedented wave of existential distress. And it's not because they are weak. It's because they are wise enough to feel the hollowness of a culture that has lost its center. What has been lost is not simply tradition, it is pluralism. Pluralism is the celebration of diverse paths to the sacred. It's when you tell me about Christmas and I tell you about Hanukkah. When she shares Ramadan and he tells of Diwali. When the sacred stories of our ancestors are honored as windows into shared human longing. In a truly pluralistic culture, we don't suppress difference. We cherish it. We listen. We learn. And in doing so, we become more whole. But when we removed all spiritual expression from the public square, we did not create neutrality. We created spiritual silence. And silence is not inclusion. Silence is erasure. The result is a generation growing up without maps. No shared narrative, no sacred language, no common understanding of the inner life. In everything that truly matters, we are mute. And this muteness leaves us vulnerable to despair, disconnection, and disorientation. But this is not the end of the story. There is an awakening underway. It is not tied to institutions. It is not dictated from pulpits. It is arising from the ground up, from individuals, especially young people, who are hungry for something real. Gen Z is not looking to be entertained. They are looking for depth. They are questioning the old narratives and seeking new ones. They are sensitive to injustice, wired for connection, and willing to dismantle systems that no longer serve life. And at the root of all this is a spiritual impulse. The impulse to live in truth, to align with love, to contribute to a better world. The science supports this. We know from twin studies that spirituality is 1/3 innate and 2/3 shaped by environment and choice. That means we all have the wiring. What matters is how we activate it. And what shapes that activation most are the choices we make. To meditate, to pray, to serve others, to spend time in nature, to surround ourselves with people who nurture our spiritual growth. In childhood and adolescence, our environment. The words, rituals, and stories of our families shapes our spiritual core. But as we grow, that responsibility becomes our own. In our 20s and 30s, we become the architects of our spiritual life. We choose our teachers. We choose our practices. We choose our communities. And those choices matter deeply. Because when we ignore the spiritual core, the consequences are not just philosophical. They are practical. Spiritual depletion leads to emotional fragility. A spiritually malnourished person is more susceptible to anxiety, to loneliness, to despair. But when we nourish that core, when we engage our awakened brain, we become resilient, creative, and whole. This is why reclaiming spirituality is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It is not about returning to dogma. It is about returning to depth, to dialogue, to the questions that matter. Who am I? What is the meaning of this moment? How do I live in alignment with love? We must reintroduce these questions into the spaces we share, into classrooms, into leadership, into medicine, into mental health. Not with the goal of converting anyone, but with the goal of liberating everyone to speak, explore, and develop their own spiritual awareness. This is the next evolution of human culture. Not a retreat into the past, but a movement forward into integration. A recognition that we are not just minds and bodies, but souls. That health is not just the absence of illness, but the presence of meaning. That success is not just achievement, but alignment. We can be spiritually vibrant and scientifically grounded. We can be diverse in belief and united in reverence. We can live in a world where meditation and neuroscience, ritual and reason coexist and enhance one another. The awakened brain is the bridge between these worlds. It is the capacity to perceive the sacred in everyday life and the willingness to bring that perception into action. And when enough people do this, not just privately, but publicly, a new public square will emerge. One where the soul is welcome. One where truth is spoken. One where healing is possible. This is not hypothetical. It is happening. The conversation is shifting. The silence is breaking. And the future will not be a retreat into dogma, but a rise into collective awakening. Chapter 7. Cultivating the Awakened Brain. The awakened brain is not a fixed trait. It is a living, growing capacity within us all. Like a muscle, it strengthens with use. Like a language, it deepens through practice. And like a relationship, it flourishes with attention and love. Every person is born with the neuro-spiritual equipment necessary for awakening. But whether it is activated depends on how we live. Cultivating the awakened brain begins with a choice. A choice to engage the world not just with the intellect, but with the whole self. To move from transactional perception to relational presence. To live in dialogue with life, rather than in domination over it. The practices that awaken this inner faculty are simple, ancient, and deeply effective. Meditation, prayer, service, immersion in nature, sacred reading. Each of these opens the neural pathways through which we experience the sacred. They stimulate the regions of the brain responsible for self-transcendence, empathy, and moral discernment. They increase cortical thickness. They build resilience against depression. And they rewire the brain toward love. This is not just subjective. It's physiological. When we engage in these practices regularly, the parietal, precuneus, and occipital regions of the brain become more robust. These areas are not random. They are involved in spatial orientation, empathy, and the sense of being part of something larger. In the awakened brain, these regions are active and integrated. In chronic depression, they are thin and disconnected. This tells us something essential. That spiritual life is not escapism. It is neuroprotective. It is life-saving. It is the pathway to inner strength. But spiritual practices are not one-size-fits-all. Each person has a unique way of connecting with the transcendent. For some, it may be silent contemplation beneath a tree. For others, it may be singing in a community of faith, writing poetry, or walking through a city street with open awareness. What matters is not the form, but the intention. To be present, to listen, to feel, to commune. Awakened awareness is not about intensity. It's about receptivity. It's not about effort. It's about surrender. When we soften our grip on the world, when we let go of control, something deeper emerges. Life begins to speak. The red doors that once frustrated us are revealed as blessings. The trail angels appear. The yellow doors open. One powerful tool for cultivating the awakened brain is the practice of synchronicity reflection. Think back on your life. What moments felt too aligned to be random? Who showed up with a message just when you needed it? What closed door led to something better than you could have planned? These moments are not accidents. They are evidence of a deeper order. And when we name them, remember them, reflect on them, we reinforce the neural pathways that perceive meaning. We train our brain to recognize the sacred. Another vital practice is conscious decision-making with both mind and heart. In our culture, we often rely solely on logic, listing pros and cons, analyzing outcomes. But there is another form of knowing, intuitive, felt, embodied. When we face a choice, we can ask the question with our head, and then wait for the answer of the heart. We can notice where the body relaxes, where peace settles in, where a quiet yes arises. That is awakened guidance. That is wisdom from within. The more we trust this guidance, the clearer it becomes. It's like tuning a radio. At first, there's static. Then, with time and patience, the frequency sharpens. We begin to receive with clarity. And what we receive is not always what we expect, but it is always what we need. This trust and guidance is not passive. It is deeply active. It asks us to live with courage, to say yes to the yellow doors, even when they lead into the unknown, to follow the nudges, even when they defy logic, to act on faith, not blind faith, but informed faith, built from experience, synchronicity, and love. There is another practice I often guide: sitting at the table with those who truly have your best interest in mind. In this visualization, you invite to your inner table anyone, living or deceased, who loves you unconditionally. You invite your higher self. You invite your higher power, however you name it. And then you ask them, what do I need to hear right now? The answers that emerge are not random. They come from the awakened brain, from the deep knowing that exists beyond thought, from the sacred field in which we are always held. These are not complicated practices. They require no credentials, no special tools, no sacred space other than your own willingness. They are your birthright, your inheritance as a spiritual being in a human life. The key is consistency. Like water on stone, repeated practice shapes the terrain of the mind. It strengthens the bridge between thought and soul. It transforms moments of doubt into invitations to deepen. And over time, it creates a life that is not just lived, but awakened. We also cultivate the awakened brain through service. When we give from the heart, when we help another, care for an animal, protect the earth, we activate the neural circuitry of love. We become less isolated, less consumed by our own fears, and more attuned to the truth that we are part of something sacred and whole. This is the paradox. The more we give, the more we receive. The more we let go, the more we gain. The more we open, the more we are filled. In cultivating the awakened brain, we are not becoming someone new. We are returning to who we already are. We are remembering what our culture has forgotten. That life is sacred, that love is real, and that we are here to live in relationship with the divine in whatever form we perceive it. There is no formula, only faith. No prescription, only practice. And in each practice, each moment of listening, we build a life of meaning. Not one shaped by control, but one shaped by grace. This is the life your brain was built for. This is the journey your soul has longed to take. And it begins wherever you are, with the next breath, the next step, the next yes. Chapter 8. Practices for an Awakened Life. The awakened life is not an abstract ideal. It is lived moment by moment, through small intentional choices that align us with the sacred. These choices are not bound to any particular faith or tradition. They are universal. They are how we tune our awareness, strengthen our spiritual core, and live in relationship with something greater than ourselves. One of the most powerful practices I offer is the 3 doors exercise. It begins with remembering a time in your life when you wanted something deeply, an opportunity, a relationship, an outcome. You planned carefully, you did everything right, but when you reached out for it, the door was stuck. No matter how hard you pushed, it wouldn't open. That red door represents the moments in life when achieving awareness fails us, when logic and effort fall short. And it's in those moments, when we are forced to stop, to reassess, to surrender, that the sacred often steps in. After some time, you pivot. Maybe 30 degrees, maybe a full turn. And there, off to the side, you find a yellow door wide open. This is not the door you planned for, but it leads to something better. A job that nourishes your soul. A person who truly sees you. A path that feels like home. And somewhere between the red door and the yellow door, a trail angel appears. Someone who says a word, tells a story, or offers a kindness that helps you make the turn. You may never see them again, but their presence was pivotal. They were a messenger, a guide, a spark of synchronicity. The Three Doors exercise teaches us that the most important moments in life are often not achieved, but revealed. They emerge from dialogue with the universe, from trust in the unfolding, from awakened awareness. When we reflect on these moments, we begin to see the architecture of grace. We see that we are not walking alone. Another deeply transformative practice is the Council of Love visualization, gifted to me by the late Dr. Gary Weaver. In this practice, you close your eyes and imagine a table in front of you. At this table, you invite anyone, living or deceased, who truly has your best interest in mind, your grandmother, a mentor, a friend who saw your soul. You also invite your higher self, the eternal wise part of you, and finally, your higher power, however you understand it. God, Spirit, Source. As you sit at this table, you ask them, "Do you love me?" And they say yes. Then you ask, "What do I need to know right now?" The answers that come are not inventions. They are awakenings. They come from the deepest layer of your being, from your awakened brain, from the sacred relationship that exists between you and the source of life. This practice can be returned to again and again. The people at the table may change, the messages may evolve, but the love remains constant. And the guidance is always available when we are ready to listen. Nature immersion is another powerful practice. Time in nature is not just calming. It is spiritually recalibrating. The more we expose ourselves to living systems, the more our brain synchronizes with the pulse of life. High amplitude alpha waves, those associated with spiritual awareness, become dominant. Our nervous system settles. Our perception shifts. We begin to feel the oneness of all life, not as a concept, but as a reality. In this state, everything becomes a teacher. The tree that reaches across a ravine to support another tree. The geese that warn of danger. The sunset that invites stillness. Nature doesn't lecture. It mirrors. And in that mirroring, we remember what we are. Gratitude is also an essential doorway to awakening. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing what is real. Gratitude trains the mind to notice the sacred. It moves our attention from what is missing to what is given. And in that shift, we open the heart. Each morning or evening, pause and ask, what am I grateful for? What synchronicity, what kindness, what lesson did life offer today? Write it down, speak it aloud, let it land in your being. And when you are in pain, gratitude does not vanish, it simply deepens. Even in grief, there can be awe. Even in darkness, there can be light. The awakened life is not a life without suffering. It is a life in which suffering has meaning. It is a life in which love prevails, even when circumstances are hard. Silence is another sacred practice. We live in a world of noise, digital, verbal, emotional, but the soul speaks in stillness. Set aside time, even a few minutes, to be quiet each day. No goals, no input, just being. In this space, the static clears, and the guidance that has always been there begins to surface. Lastly, we awaken through service. When we give from love, not obligation, not ego, but love, we activate the deepest circuits of the awakened brain. We remember that we are not isolated entities, but part of a living web. We matter. Our choices ripple. Our presence heals. There is no perfect formula, no one way. What matters is consistency, sincerity, and the willingness to be changed. The awakened life is not a technique. It is a posture, a stance of openness, humility, and relationship with life itself. And the result is not just a calmer mind. It is a fuller existence, one in which miracles happen daily. Not because the laws of physics have been broken, but because the laws of spirit have been honored. You begin to see that every person you meet could be a trail angel. Every conversation could hold a message. Every closed door could be the turn that leads to freedom. Life becomes alive, not as a machine, but as a sacred partner. This is not fantasy. This is what your brain was built for. This is what your heart longs to remember. And this is the invitation to live as if everything is speaking, because it is. Thank you for listening.